All right. So, hey, this is CK Barlow. This is another in my series of interviews for the Arts Entrepreneurship class in the Arts Management program at the University of New Mexico. And today I'm really delighted to have with me basically the first person I've met in Baltimore, other than some of my partner's coworkers, um, the lovely and talented Alexis Kimbrough of the Growth Group. And the Growth
Hey,
Group,
yeah,
hey,
I know it's kind of a tongue twister there, but thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
absolutely. And the reason that we got in touch is because, of course, I, trying to do the right thing, am looking into how I go about registering my composing business now that I live here in Maryland. And I just did an internet search and I found Alexis's firm, The Growth Group, which is really cool. It's an accounting firm that specializes in services for musicians, bands, recording studios, publishers, and so forth. So I thought it would be great to talk with Alexis today and find out kind of more about what she does, but also with an eye toward this notion of complementary opportunities, which we are talking about in the class, which has to do with finding those things that you enjoy doing and those things that you're really good at and combining them to come up with maybe an interesting business idea or a cool opportunity for earning some money. So yeah, so I guess let's get started. So Alexis, you have a really great background. It's super interesting to me that you were a flute player, maybe still are a flute player, and that's one of the things that how you ended up at Howard to study there. You want to tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now?
Sure. So I started playing flute at age 10. It was one of those things where we got to try out like all the band instruments, and I ended up picking flute, and my mom bought me one, and I knew it was a sacrifice for her to purchase that instrument. Like we didn't necessarily have the money, and so I wanted to make sure that if I was going to ask her to make that sacrifice, that I was going to be really good. And I was actually going to practice. It wasn't going to be something that I put down in 15 minutes or 2 years. So I ended up playing flute all the way through high school. I went to state competitions and all that kind of stuff, and then ended up getting I really wanted to go to Howard University. That was one of my top choices. So my mom took me out there for spring break my senior year, and little did I know that they even had a band. Let alone that they were offering scholarships. And so my mom called the band director the night before we went in, and he's like, yeah, have her come in. I didn't even have my instrument with me. He's like, no problem, we'll give her one. And so he went in, she handed me a sheet of music and asked me to sight read it, and I played it, and after I finished, he said, do you want a scholarship? Of course I do. Why wouldn't I? Um, so that's kind of what kicked it off. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to secure financing to be able to go to Howard. So I did take him up on that music scholarship. I played in the different bands that we have at Howard for the full 4 years I was there on scholarship, and but I ended up getting an accounting degree. I never had planned to make music my full-time thing, but it definitely helped to get me where I am now, and that's now that I'm with Growth Group, that's kind of my give back to the community or the discipline, if you will, that helped me become an accountant. So I went and graduated from Howard, and then I went to American University, which is also in DC, and got my master's in taxation. So I'm kind of a tax and accounting expert, if you will.
That's fantastic. Okay, first off, I love your mom. That's so awesome. I mean, okay, there are a lot of parents out there who will, well, for starters, there are a lot of parents out there who would not make that sacrifice
Yeah.
for their kid and get them that instrument. There are a lot of parents who would have make that sacrifice, but the fact that you at that age were like so clear that it was a stretch for your family to do this for you, and you had been raised to that point to say like, okay, I better keep up my end of the bargain here.
Yeah,
That
for sure.
that says worlds about like your mom. That's rad. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and that she had the presence of mind to call the band director and set that up. I mean, that's so great. That's so great.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's not shy in any way. So she's like,
I'm
hey,
hearing that.
yeah, if you really want to go to school here, you better work it out. Figure out what it is that you can do to get yourself here, and why not use that talent that you, I mean, you've been playing for the last, like, at that point, have been what, 8 years or so. Why not bring that here, you know? And that was my way in, if you will, to Howard. They hadn't even processed my application yet, and the director said he would make sure that I got in. And I'm like, oh, this is so nice. You know, it just ended up working out that way. Not to say I couldn't have gotten in otherwise, but it was probably certainly a help that I had a scholarship waiting for me there too. So, and my mom has a musical background as well. She's played piano in church and sings and that kind of thing, as well. So, you know, she values the arts as well. So that's definitely a help.
That's fantastic. That's great. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's having sort of the, I mean, not to like be disrespectful of my own family, but that sort of gumption, you know, the like the we say in New Mexico maybe huevos to be like, you want that thing, you go get it. It was much more kind of lackadaisical and, well, you know, if you do well enough in school, maybe you'll get a scholarship. And like, I remember when I was a senior in high school, I didn't know what a scholarship was.
Right, right.
And I just kind of got one by accident because of my scores on the PSAT. It's like a practice SAT that you do a little sooner. And I didn't even know. Nobody ever said to me, hey, if you really apply yourself and do well in school, you can get money from other people to help you pay for college. Nobody ever said that to me. And your mom is out there like, okay, let's see, we can try this, we can try this. If you want to go here, let's figure it out. I mean, it just wasn't, there wasn't that kind of mindset. And so I kind of had to figure that out and come up with that later in life about figuring out what you want and going for it. So
right,
that's awesome. That's really awesome.
Yeah. Hey, Mom.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Mom. And was there sort of an aha moment for you? Like, why accounting? Was there a point at which you were like, I really dig numbers, or what happened for you?
Yeah, I can't say that I really dig numbers. I know that sounds crazy, but I originally went to Howard thinking I was going to be a lawyer. And of course, okay, lawyers, accountants, doctors, we can call them all the same thing maybe. But I took my first pre-law class and I was like, oh, I cannot do this. It was just so not interesting for me. And so I was like, okay, I need to find out what else I want to do. And my uncle had said, hey, why don't you try out the business school, because there's a lot of different disciplines within the business school, but you'll probably be able to find, you know, a job after college if you major in something business related. So he's like, just transfer to business school. So I did that. And of course, one of the first classes you have to take is accounting. And I was like, everybody hated the accounting classes, okay? Like, everybody in business school has to take them, but it's not something that's anybody's favorite. But I did really well, and I was like, oh, I get this. It's not, I don't want to say it's not difficult, but it just really clicked for me. And I was like, okay, well, I can do this. Why don't I change my major to accounting? And then the interest came. So I think I'm more of a try it type of person. Try it and see how it goes and how you like it and how it fits for you. And then I'm like, okay, well, if this is something that I can do, I have the ability to do, and then it's also kind of interesting to me, then I kind of marry those two things together. So that's kind of where the accounting part started, is that I had to take the class, and I ended up being pretty good at it. So I was like, hey, why don't I change this to my major? And then, of course, later I married the accounting and the music together. So
That's fantastic. Okay, that's great. No, I mean, I used to have a boss, a really, really creative guy who was a scientist. He's a scientist at one of the national laboratories here in the United States. And he would say that you're supposed to do that thing in life that comes so easily or naturally to you that you're almost likely to sort of write it off. It's like, oh, you know, I can do that, but that's no big deal. And like thinking that it should be something that's like harder or doesn't come as easily for you is more worthwhile as a pursuit, which is really interesting. So you just sort of like ended up there. I mean, and I kind of did exactly the same thing. I started as a systems analysis major, computer programming, and I was like, I'm okay at this, I'm fine at this, but it's not like ringing my bell. And I just found this other major called technical writing where I wouldn't lose my scholarship and I could use my programming classes to count as electives. Okay. And I changed, and I ended up having a long career as a technical writer and then always working with music and music technology. And so now I'm an instructor of music technology, and I write write about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's totally interesting how we can end up in these places. But yeah, I was like, oh, this is not for me. Found some other thing, tried it,
Hmm.
loved it. You know, it's super interesting how that happens. But all right, so talk to us about Growth Group. What exactly does Growth Group do?
Yeah, sure. So we're an accounting firm. And as broad as that is, we've made it a lot more specific in that I only serve musicians and bands, recording artists, songwriters, that kind of thing. So those that are music creators, if you will, and then also recording studios and independent record labels. And so I'm very heavily music focused on purpose, because there are some nuances and things that are different about this industry than, say, manufacturing or retail or airlines or whatever, transportation, that kind of thing. It is much different. And so, like I said, me serving the music community is kind of my give back from, the scholarship and the discipline that I learned from the craft. And I guess to kind of describe our day to day or what services we provide, are of course taxes. That's normally the one of the first things that people kind of come into contact with us about is, hey, this music's in tax thing, I don't really get it, or I don't want to get it. Here, you do this part. And so that's normally the first part that people find us about. The second part is like, was built out of necessity, which was more the bookkeeping and record keeping side of, you have an artist who is traveling the country, or the world, I should say the world, performing and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of things that come along with that, and being able to actually put all the internal processes of keeping the money together and making sure people get paid and make sure you get paid. So we do that as well. And then also like the accounting work, and we do some price coaching, to kind of help artists get the confidence to charge a fair rate for themselves, and to really value what they do and help other people to see the value of what they do, versus just kind of taking the free route, or cutting themselves short, because they do provide value in the world, and helping them to be able to charge for that. So
Cool, cool. And so, what do you think about the trend in the last several years to give music away, to give art away, to have people expect you to, like, well, hang your. There's another artist I spoke to who's a painter, and he's really great. He had a dentist. His dentist said, hey, you could hang some of your paintings in my office. It would be great exposure. And he was like, no. I mean, like, what is that?
no.
How do you talk to your clients about that? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so two things. I've seen a lot of stuff where it's like, hey, you should pay for music because we have bills. People don't buy music because you have bills, just like you don't buy accounting services because I have bills. You buy it out of necessity or out of enjoyment. And so you really want to reach your target audience. Like, for example, like the artist that you're talking about, maybe the type of people that are visiting the dental office are not likely the type of people that would buy his art. Maybe the people that would buy his art maybe are the dentists of the world, or the doctors of the world, who can afford to buy a $4,000 piece of art to put on their wall.
Exactly.
I don't want you to hang it up. I don't want to hang it up for free. You should purchase it because it's beautiful. And it's going to add a certain ambiance to your office building. So I think I always tell artists that what you're doing is not, it's only free if you want it to be. You can give away anything if you would like to. I blog every Tuesday, and so technically I'm giving away pieces of my brain as time comes along. But that's something that I've chosen to do. If you're wanting to make money from the music, then giving it away is counterproductive to what your goal is, or music or whatever other type of art. Let me not be too specific there. But you're putting value out into the world, and there are people who value that, and that's what I try to help them realize, is that even though that one person who contacted you that one day wants you to do your artwork for free, doesn't mean that there's not someone else who's willing to pay $500, $1,000 for that one piece or more. It's really just about finding the people who really value what you do. If music was invaluable or needed to be handed out for free, think about if everybody just stopped creating music, and we'd only have the old stuff to listen to. You know, not, and I
Yeah.
say old meaning, we'd have to just keep listening to the same stuff that's already been produced, and everybody stops producing music, we'd have some issues. There's music is present in everything, whether it's March Madness on the floor, you can hear music playing in the stadiums, from the street, everywhere. That it's in movies, so it is valuable to society. It's just a matter of finding the people that really want what you have. So I'm not a big proponent of you working for free.
Hmm.
You can give away what you want to for free, but I still think that the art itself is very valuable.
Hmm. No, that you make a really good point on um, when you say people don't buy it to help me pay my bills. It,
Hmm.
people buy it for their own enjoyment or because they need to put it in the video that they're making or what have you. And
Hmm.
they don't buy that piece of art as a favor to you.
Right.
They buy it from what they're going to get for it. And so don't, just like stop selling it that way.
Right. Yeah. My
Stop using
inputs.
that as a selling point because it doesn't have anything
Yeah,
to do with
it's
them. So
totally not. If anything, it's kind of annoying as a fan. Like, okay, well, I have bills too, so I should use my bill money to pay for your art. I don't know, but it's not really. That's not the way that consumers think. It's not the way that fans think. They're not thinking, "Hey, I want to support this band." They're like, "No, I want their music." Purchasing something is a selfish thing. We're not doing it for you. We're doing it for us. And like, oh, I'm purchasing that song because I want to play it at my wedding, or I'm purchasing that song because I heard it on the radio and it made me feel a certain way, or I heard it in a movie and it did this, or it just helps me remember that time, or whatever it is. Um, it's not about your inputs, and no one cares how much it cost you to record or how long it took you to paint or anything like that. Just like, for example, I don't charge by the hour at Growth Group. One reason being because my input, how long it takes me, does not matter to you. You just want the results. And so we agree on a price up front, and if that's something if that's valuable to you for what the result is going to be, then we're good. If not, then you might have to find someone else. But we don't charge by the hour because my inputs aren't valuable for the result. I could take 20 hours or I could take 20 minutes, but if you get the same result, that's what you're really paying for, is what you're getting out of it. So,
wow, fascinating. Okay. That's a really interesting way to think about it. I mean, I guess it's just like flat rate versus hourly. It's not that um, different than that. That's what it is. It's just sort of the mindset that you're applying to it is. I haven't heard anybody express it that way before. That's pretty interesting. Okay, so at what point in an artist's career do you think they should be getting in touch with an accountant?
good question. I think that you should consult with an accountant when you decide it's not a hobby. When you think that this is something that you want to make your livelihood, and you want to, help, this is something you want to do into retirement and that kind of thing, that's when you should at least consult someone that's a professional, whether it be a lawyer, an accountant, um, because they can help set you up business wise to be successful, and maybe help with some of that price coaching or record keeping and things like that. Because what a lot of artists forget is that if they're not a hobby, then they're a business, right? And if they're a business, then they should operate that way. Be the CFO, be the CEO of your brand, and treat it as a business. And I know that's sometimes hard for artists to kind of, oh, I just love what I do. Well, I love what I do too, but I still have to, treat it as a business as well. And so I think it doesn't have to be an expensive thing. It could just be an hour-long conversation where you get some guidance on what you should be looking for or what you should be looking to. Um, but it should definitely be something, once you decide that this is a career path versus just something that you enjoy doing for fun. Like, for example, I like to sew. Do I ever plan on selling clothing? Absolutely not. I know that, like, I'm not that good at it, and it's, like, the arm might be a little crooked, but I made it, so it was good. It was good for me, but I don't ever plan to do that for anyone else. So, that's a hobby that I don't need business advice on, versus, something that I'm trying to make a living out of. Would be great to. So I say artists should consult a professional when they decide that this is something that they want to do for a living, and they're needing help with that.
That's a really important distinction. There's a hobby and there's make a living from, but there's this middle ground too that I think a lot of people are in. That is, I'd like to make some money from it.
Mhm.
And I think that when you cross that line from saying, I'd like to make a little bit of money off my art, I'd like to make some money off my band's music, when you cross that line into, this is it, this is my career, this is my career, this is my livelihood, that becomes a lot more serious in
Mhm.
terms of, meeting your financial obligations day to day, but
Mhm.
also just like the long term. I mean, the long game of, am I going to be able to put away a little bit of money every month toward my retirement? Am I going to
Right.
be able to raise kids? Am I, is that something that I'm going to sacrifice because I'm not sure how this is going to go? And if it goes really well, awesome, I can do that. Like, that's a really important delineation, I think, to make, is between, I make some money from it versus I make my living from it. That's a
Mhm.
big, serious line to cross. So
Right.
that's an excellent answer, I think, in terms of talking to. Now I feel like I better set up an appointment. Good
Yeah,
pitch.
I
Good
think
pitch.
Yeah, I think one of the things is like when you decide that, like I said, like when you decide that this is what you want to do for a living and this is what you want to carry you and make sure that you're eating every day, then that's when you definitely want to start consulting a professional to make sure you've got everything together. I just talked to an artist I think last week, and he's fully he's fully employed. He's an employee for the government, but right now he's coming up against that wall where the day job is getting in the way of the music, to where he can't take on any more shows, he can't take on any more teaching gigs because he still has to go to work from 9 to 5. And that when that conflict starts to happen too, and you really want to do the music full time, that might be another time to consult with somebody like he did. He went ahead and called and said, "Hey, this is what's going on. How do I make this transition from employee to self-employed?" So that's another time too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay. Good. All right. All right. Oh, okay. Here's that classic question that I talked about. What do you know now that you really wish you had known either in college or like soon after getting out of college?
Okay. I would say that there's not one way to pursue a career. There are so many different avenues to achieve, just to, like I said, marry the things that you love and also the things that you're good at. And they don't have to be the traditional path. Just to kind of open my doors a little bit, I'm 28 and I'm 100% self-employed as an accountant. That's not where I thought I would be at 21 when I graduated from college. I thought I was going to go work for a big firm and work my way up the ranks and become a partner one day, and
Right.
that's not, but once I got into it, it was like, man, I don't really like this. I really don't like this place where I work, or I don't like the people I work with. And so it was like, what do I have to do to make sure that I'm still happy in life and that I'm content with life? Because most of our work life is spent, 8 hours a day of our waking hours are spent at this place. So how can I make this more comfortable for me? And if I'm not able to make my day job comfortable, what can I do on the side that's enjoyable, or that kind of thing? So I think originally my career path was get a good job, make sure it pays well, it has some good benefits, so I have health insurance, and make a career out of it and work there for 25 years and get a pension. And that's just, that's kind of the old school way of thinking, if you will. I think now with technology, you're in Baltimore, I'm in Atlanta, and we're still able to work together. I think now people can carve out their own career path, and it doesn't have to be that traditional, I work for someone else at a desk from 9 to 5, and and that's how my life goes, and I do that each and every day. I think you can create a different opportunity. It doesn't have to be that you're the performer on stage. Maybe you are a composer and a songwriter, and your songs and your what you've created is still in movies and still, being performed, just not by you, and you're still making a great career in music or art, in a different way. So I think
Okay.
that's what I would say, is that to take a different career path and not necessarily think just about the traditional way things were done.
No, that's really great advice. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is that George Bernard Shaw, that life is not about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself. And
I
I think that, yeah, that totally applies to just sort of life and how you live it, but also your career. And you don't have to do this cookie cutter thing of
right.
slotting yourself into somebody else's job. And another quote I saw yesterday was something like, if if you don't work on your own dream, somebody else will hire you to work on theirs.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that really kind of, I mean, if you have any aspirations of going your own way and building your own vision, that one definitely drives a stake through the heart of having an 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 job for sure. Because you really are. You're basically toiling away um, on somebody else's vision. And when you
Hmm.
think about it that way, it's sort of, yeah, it's maybe unnecessarily demeaning. But
Yeah.
there are excellent jobs out there to be had, supporting somebody else's dream, and maybe that's what you're really great at.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe that's what you're really great at, is being on a team and seeing what part you can play and what value you can bring to that team to support a bigger vision, and that's fine. But if you have your own vision, um, put your energy into that as soon as you can, basically.
Yeah,
But
for sure. I totally, totally agree with that. I think oftentimes we get caught in the security of hustling for someone else's dream, and forget that we also had some things that we wanted to accomplish. Recently, I watched this interview of Damon Dash on The Breakfast Club. I'm not sure if you saw that, but he said some things that, like you said, are almost offensive if you're employed. And
oh, really?
but it was like, but at the same time, it was kind of a motivator, if you will, of hustling for your own dream. One of the things he said is, I hustle for my last name, not for my first. He's not really trying to be famous. He's trying to, I mean, he is, but he's not trying, he's really trying to build a legacy that can carry on past his life. And he was just saying that he couldn't do that if he were an employee. He can't hand off his job to his son, but he could hand off his business to his son, or that kind of thing. And so it was just really interesting, his thought process around that too.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. Sort of like, sometimes it takes getting offended to wake us up. That's,
Yes, for sure.
sometimes we need a little cold water in the face to go, ooh, yeah, that hit a little close to home.
uh,
Why? And it makes you take a look at what you're doing, and if it's really what you want to be doing. I think that's
yeah,
that's
for
probably
sure.
important for us to get ticked off and hurt once in a while. So
Right,
make sure
exactly.
make sure we're paying attention. All right. So what makes you happy?
um I one time, I think it was Kirk Franklin who said, you know that I'd rather be content, because if you're happy, then something has to be happening. And so I think I'm more content. I'm working more towards contentment than happiness, because then it feels like something has to be going on, in order to drive that. So I think that I would answer that question by saying that, doing what I love. And I know that's like so cliche, and everybody's like, "Oh, follow your passion." But one of the things, I really enjoy what I do, and I really enjoy that. I've married the two, and now I create my own schedule. I'm here with you at 11:45 in the afternoon or in the morning, and it's not the traditional accounting thing. And so I've kind of, like you said, I've created my life the way that I want it to be. And that's what makes me happy. I can pick up and I can work from anywhere, so long as I have a Wi-Fi connection. And that's something that's important to me. If I want to go work in Australia, I can. I'd just be a couple hours behind. I might have to wake up to do this interview at 1 in the morning. But at the same time, to me, that's valuable. That's kind of how I want my life to be, so that I don't have to be strung to a desk, or tied down. And so what makes me happy is being able to create the life that I want, and then adjust it as I go, and more things happen.
That's cool. I think I just read Bob Dylan yesterday said, a happy person is someone who gets up in the morning, goes to bed at night, and in between does something he does what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, I mean, we have a lot of freedom. See, to me, I almost feel like I didn't grow up with a lot of money. Sounds like you didn't either.
Hmm.
Still and all, for me, having visited places like Uganda, um, this is Disneyland in terms
Oh,
of our standard of living that we have here and the
oh yeah.
opportunities that we have here. And it almost feels like an obligation to not be like miserable and stuck.
Yes.
And I know there are people out there, people in abusive relationships, people in dead end jobs that they can't get out of for family reasons or whatever. I know that there are circumstances out there that prevent people from making a move to something that they like better. And I get that and I empathize with that. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I empathize with that and I get it. I know it exists here in the United States. But I think in large part, many of us have choices. And
Hmm.
if we are among the lucky people who have choices and we don't take advantage of that, of our choices, we're
Yeah.
like failing,
Mm.
failing ourselves because it's, oh my gosh, there's so many people who have so much less available to them and are pulling themselves up, and it almost feels like a responsibility that we have to like aim higher, aim higher
Right.
than being mediocre or tolerate having a job that you just tolerate.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? One of the things that helped me, what I say, jump off the cliff of full employment where I'm, totally reliant on my employer. And it's not, like I said, it's not a bad thing. But for me to jump off the cliff into self-employment, I read a quote, or I read the book that Todd Henry wrote. It was called The Accidental Creative. And one of the things he said in there was, the love of comfort is frequently the enemy of greatness.
Oh yeah,
And I think
no doubt.
that I was like the queen of comfort. Okay, as an accountant, I'm very risk adverse, and so like
Yes.
for me, I'm like, yeah, I'm super comfortable right now. Giving this up is a little bit hard. But I ended up, selling my house, quitting my job, moving to Atlanta, in order to pursue the life that I wanted to create. And I had to get way out of my comfort zone for that. And, I was like, man, I lived like a college student at one point. Why can't I go back to that? It's just me. I'm not married. I don't have kids yet. I've got a dog. You don't hear him right now. I was hoping he wasn't barking. But it's one of those things where I had to remove myself from my comfort zone and essentially say, hey, I'm okay with living like this in less than comfortable for me at this point in life in order to pursue what I want to do. And I know that I can always go back and get a day job. I can always go back and try it again later when I'm 50 or 60 or 40, heck, 30. I could go back and get a day job and still be okay. But I feel like there wasn't another time in life that would be great to do this and try it without dragging other people into it with me.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, now would be the time to try it out. And I think it's good for people to just take risks. It's okay to fail. Um, yeah, try it. And if it doesn't work, try something else. Fail often.
Yeah, that's Thomas Edison. I've found what for I haven't failed 40,000 times. I've found 40,000 ways that don't work.
Right,
But,
right.
but no, I mean when I left my corporate job, I was making about 3 times what I make now.
Hmm.
I was, and because I'm with a same-sex partner and we are legally married,
Hmm.
my employer in Albuquerque was insuring her. We had health insurance for both of us because we were legally married.
Hmm.
And part of my stepping off that cliff was walking away from that.
Hmm.
And that, you know, much more than the other money, because that effectively is money,
Right.
um, much more than the salary, that broke my heart a little bit because it was a big deal to finally get that. And I was dragging somebody else with me. But it
Hmm.
was a decision we made together as a couple
Right.
over many nights of crunching the numbers and making sure it was okay. And within the first year, she, as a massage therapist, hurt her wrists and was out and on workers' comp, which is, a fraction of her normal pay.
Right.
And we were fine, totally out of the blue, the first year that I'm not at a corporate job anymore.
Mhm.
And we made it, we're fine. We got
Yep.
through it. So, if anything, it set her on a path to what she is now, which is a spa manager. So it's fine. But yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy what you get used to,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, I think for me, I finally hit a point where I disliked, and that's being polite, my day job enough that I just had to go, whereas I'd actually really enjoyed a lot of my technical writing jobs.
Right.
So yeah, it's different for everybody what kind of pushes them to the edge of that cliff, and then when they finally step off. So
Mhm.
um, so your business growth group is the result of you kind of brainstorming about how do I combine the things that I love and how do I give back music. I love this statement that you made about your flute practice taught you the discipline that you were later able to apply to your accounting studies and to become really good. Like you understood the kind of devoted study that it took, having done that with flute.
Mhm.
Um, but are there, to come up with ideas like that for your business, are there particular things that you do for brainstorming? Do you say routinely, like every other Friday, take an hour to brainstorm new business ideas or anything like that?
I wouldn't say it's regimented in that way. I love to read. It's been something that I've loved since I was a kid. My mom used to be like, the car didn't have like the dome light for the back seat, and so she's like, put the book away until we get to the house because, yeah, you can't see anything. You're gonna mess up your eyes. But yeah, so reading is one thing that I do, and I feel like it may have nothing to do with my business, whatever I'm reading, but at the same time, just a little nugget of something can kind of inspire some type of creative
Oh,
something or another. And so I feel like that's often what happens is that just other things in life kind of inspire or drum up some type of new business idea or a new service or something like that. For example, um, one of the services that I provide is called Watch My Box. And really what it is um, with touring artists, they're not at home a lot, right? They're probably on the road more than they're home. And so what happens is if the IRS or the state of Maryland or state of Georgia, whoever, contacts them, they're not on the road. They don't see that letter that comes in the mail.
oh, that's a good
And don't
point.
ever believe, yeah, and don't ever believe a phone call from any of them. They don't call you normally. So they're going to miss that. And normally the deadline to respond is between like 10 and 30 days. And so if you're gone, you're not going to get it. So what I did was I started to work with all of my touring artists to make sure that I also get a copy of it. So while they're on the road, if they get a notice, I also get the notice. And then I'll send them a copy and tell them what to do with it. And if I already have the information, I'll just communicate with the state or the IRS for them. And really, that just came about because I was like, this is a traditional accounting thing, but nobody ever uses it. Because normally, why does your accountant need a copy of the notice? You can just send it to them when you get it. There's no reason for them to be able to do that. But I think in this field, it provides a different type of opportunity or a different type of service that's a little bit outside of the box, if you will, that I'm getting your mail, not all of it, just the stuff from the states and the IRS. But it solved the problem that they have, which is the fear of getting notices first, and the second part of not being able to respond to them. So I think I get inspiration from different places, but it's not necessarily a regimented thing. But I look at other industries. I don't necessarily always look at accounting and music. I like to look at other industries and see what they're doing too.
Okay, that's a really great idea. That's a really great idea. Both like, looking around because you never know what's going to be translatable to your own field that could be helpful and possibly lucrative.
Right.
But also like the specific thing, the getting somebody's notices for them so that they don't have to freak out when they're on the road. That's
Right.
awesome. And then I also noticed when I called and left you a message that your message said about your email that feel free to send you email, but you only check it at certain times. I can't remember if it was like noon and 4 o'clock in the
Yep.
afternoon or something like that.
Mhm.
That's like a productivity thing for you. And is there anything else that you do that you'd be interested in sharing?
Oh yeah, yeah. It is a productivity thing. I only check email at noon and 4, unless there's something like I know that I had this scheduled at 11 o'clock. So I'll make sure that I'm available via email before that, just in case we do need to communicate. So I do check it sometimes for special things, but for the most part, I realize that we're kind of stuck to our devices, whether it be phones or email or whatever. And I was realizing that I was putting out fires, if you will, about, each email that was coming in, I was responding. And so it was kind of taking me off of my focus of whatever task I was doing at that time. And it became a distraction. Then I'd have to kind of work myself back into the task. And so it was more difficult to return to the task after checking an email about something else and, checking my Twitter feed or whatever. And so what I did was I only started checking email twice a day, and I realized that nothing fell apart. And so it was like, oh, sweet, okay, this is possible. And I just when I first started doing it, I let every client know. I had an auto responder that said, hey, it's kind of like your call is important to us.
Right.
We're gonna get back to you, in a few minutes. So it was kind of like that. It was like, hey, I'm gonna respond at, if it's 5 p.m. today, you'll hear from me at noon tomorrow. If it's 2 o'clock today, you'll hear from me at 4 o'clock this afternoon. But if it's urgent, you can call me. And so it called me and leave a message. And at that time, I was answering the phone if it rang all the time, because that would indicate that they thought it was urgent. They needed to talk to me immediately. But that didn't happen. No one called. They waited for me to email them the next day, and it was fine. Like I said, nothing fell apart. And so I was like, hey, this is better for me because I'm able to devote 4 hours of time to whatever my task is without being distracted by emails that aren't urgent. And I also, another thing that I did was I don't get notifications on my phone anymore. I have my iPhone here, but I don't get notifications from Twitter or Facebook or anything. The little red button does not pop up, just because it forces you to have to look at it. It's like one of those things. And so instead of checking it so often throughout the day, I just make at my noon time and at my 4 p.m. time, that's when I check the Twitter feeds and stuff like that to see if anybody's tweeting me or saying hi, or to start relationships with other people. And that kind of started from reading a book called The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where that started from. I was like, I'll try it. I did an experiment. It worked. Now, I work more than 4 hours a week, but it definitely helped with some productivity stuff. And the other thing that I would say I do is I probably spend about 15 minutes every morning planning my day. And what I do with that is just write out the most important things that I know need to get done. I kind of make a list of everything that needs to get done, and then I label them A, B's, and C's. A's are things I have to get done today. And then I label them 1, 2, and 3. So I have an A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, like that. And then I start on A1, and I can't start on A2 or anything else until A1 is done, because I'm saying that's my most important thing. And so it just helps me to get through those most important things, sometimes that aren't necessarily urgent, because I don't want to just be putting out fires all the time. I want to make sure that I'm, adding value and things like that. So one thing I make sure I do is I post my blog post every Tuesday. So I have to make sure that I get that done because I promised that I'd do it. So.
Okay. No, that's really good. Everybody has different methods. I was just reading the other day about there's a book on something like, I can't remember if it's over 100 different creatives and how they schedule their day. And it's everybody from Beethoven to Freud to Picasso to like all these, really Ben Franklin, like really accomplished creative people, and how they structured their days. And everybody's different, but there was a fair number of them who really cranked it out first thing in the morning. Would like get up at maybe 4 or 5 and work for 4 hours before doing anything, seeing anybody, doing anything at all, and then like take a break for a while, hang out with family, come back to it later. But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm getting into a new groove in my new situation, and figuring out how that works, and when my best times to work on music versus teaching and obligations. And yeah, it's interesting. I think we're all sort of works in progress.
Yeah.
in our careers in terms of like day to day, how are we most efficient and effective? So,
Right,
um,
for sure. Yeah, one of
cool.
the other things that had a big impact for me was a book called The One Thing. I can't remember the author, but
Yeah.
I read that, and that one kind of called me out, and forced me to kind of look at how I spend my time, because we often say that we want to do something and then we don't get those things done because other urgent things come. So essentially, it was saying the most important thing to you, do that first. And so the start of my day, that time from 8 a.m. to noon, is that that's why I don't check till noon. I don't start the day with emails because that can create a whole nother to-do list for you, right? So I start my day with the things that I want to make sure that I get done first, and then check email, and maybe that'll add some other to-dos. But for the most part, to get the one thing, the most important thing done first.
Okay, that's interesting. And too, and the fact that you're on the East Coast, and I'm now on the East Coast, so this is kind of on my mind.
Mhm.
You could have a pretty productive chunk of 4 hours before people in LA are even getting started for the day.
Right, yeah, so true.
Which, in the music business, for both of us, that's a factor, that's a consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So then, you end up working later as well to accommodate them too. But
Right, yeah.
okay. All right. So here's the big accounting question, and then we'll wrap up. But
Okay.
well, maybe not a big accounting question, but maybe personal finance and small business finance. But what recommendations would you have for college students who are headed into careers in the arts, specifically for their personal finances? Like, what are some things that they could be doing right now with that kind of that long game in mind?
Great question. And honestly, this is what I did. I started to, if they have any income coming in at this point, I say invest in yourself first. And by that I mean, if you make $100, or we'll say $1,000. If you make $1,000, take 10% of that, which would be $100, and put that into a savings account and don't touch it. It might be at another bank, anything like that. And every time you get paid, just take 10% of it. You get $200, take $20 and put it in a savings account, and that'll start to bulk up. And it'll help fund your dream later. Maybe you don't have to crowdfund your next project or whatever because you've been taking a portion of every dollar that comes into you, and you're essentially reinvesting that in yourself. That's one thing that I started doing when I realized that I wanted to pursue the music and accounting full time. From my day job's paycheck, I started taking 10% of that every month and putting that into a checking account, and that, or I'm sorry, into a savings account, and that allowed me to have the bulk of savings that I did when I jumped, so that I could have that cushion. And you kind of want that cushion to be able to land on, or if you do end up, unemployed for a minute or injured or anything that can happen, it gives you that bulk, to kind of fall back on. And trust me, you'll be glad it's there.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Okay. Um, anything else that you wanna leave as parting thoughts? Those are some great book recommendations. There are some great personal finance recommendations. Wonderful story about how your career has evolved, and like your mom and sort of her role in this was just a beautiful story. So this has just been awesome. Is there anything that you want to leave with?
No, I just say, be excellent in everything that you do. Do it for yourself, and it'll make you feel a lot better.
Yay! Very good advice. Very good advice. I love it. Okay. Well, let's sign off. Thank you so much. This has been
Thank
CK
you.
Barlow talking with Alexis Kimbrough of the Growth Group, and I hope you've all enjoyed the interview.